H-1B cap registration if you are in that process. So that's what we'll discuss. That's about all I can discuss today on the cap registration. I do want to cover cap exemption because, as you can see, the cap registration or the cap lottery is very competitive. If you, I guess, calculate that at maybe 20% chance of your registration being or winning one of the H-1B slots. And so if you don't get one of those H-1B slots, there may be some alternatives. One of the alternatives could be getting an H-1B cap-exempt or a cap-exempt H-1B. But these are very, very specific. If you want to look at or if you want to consider an H-1B cap-exempt position, you need to know what the criteria is for you to be able to be cap-exempt. So cap exemption refers to those H-1B applications that the government has said do not need to be considered in that limited 85,000 H-1B cap. So the advantage to this is that if an employer is considered to be cap exempt, they can file H-1B petitions for their employees any time of the year. We do not need to go through the lottery process. And so we need to know how you would meet that, or how the employer will meet that. It's very specific criteria to do that. So there are different categories of cap exemption. The most common ones are employment by a college or university. So if you are going to be employed by a qualifying college or university, whether it's as in teaching or whether you are going to actually do other professional roles in that college or university, then there's no need to worry about the cap. As long as you meet the specialty occupation requirements, the college or university can apply for you at any time. Okay, so that's an advantage for those who are wanting or able to work for colleges or universities. If you are not in that employment situation, then there's also cap exemption for those who are working for nonprofit organizations. So if you're going to work for a nonprofit and that nonprofit has some tie or connection with a university or college, then your job can be cap exempt. Now, a lot of times people will say, well, if they're nonprofit, isn't that enough? But it's not. Not only do they have to be nonprofit, they also have to have that tie with a college or university. And it doesn't have to be that they're owned by the university or anything like that. It could be as simple as there's an agreement between the nonprofit and the university for students to intern at that nonprofit. There are a lot of nonprofits that offer internship programs, little formal internship programs where students get credit for working at that nonprofit. So if they have that kind of nonprofit and teaching or internship program, that organization could be cap exempt. And if you're going to work again in a specialty occupation with that organization, you would not need to go through the cap. Other cap exemption is more of those who are research, or if you're in a nonprofit research or governmental research organization, then you can also be cap exempt. Now, we don't have time to go through all of these. We probably could have a whole session on cap exemption and how we can go about that, but I wanted to just basically kind of give you the idea that there are possibilities of exemption. So if there's a potential for your employment in any of these types of arrangements, then you could bypass the cap and go directly into H-1B employment. The last one I just want to cover real quick is the next to last bullet point. If you are going to be employed by a for-profit organization, but your work location will be primarily at a college or university, then you can also be cap exempt. And this comes in the situation where you have a private employer, but they want you to provide services at a university, or so basically, since the typical example is a hospital, a physician situation where they're going to be they may be employed by a private practice that is for profit, but they're going to be working at a hospital that is considered a university or a university affiliated hospital. And in that case, that could still be a situation where the physician can work or can be cap exempt as well. So how do you prove cap exemption? I'll just quickly go through this slide so we'll have time for questions, but basically cap exemption does require a lot of information, as you can see on this slide. So if you're going to be employed by a university, you're going to have to show that they do meet, or the university has to show that they are a public or nonprofit university. The for-profit universities out there do not qualify. These are usually public and nonprofit universities that qualify for cap exemption. If you are going to work for a nonprofit that is affiliated with a university or has a teaching arrangement with the university, then the nonprofit has to provide its 501c3 exemption proof, as well as any agreements with those higher education organizations where it shows that they are providing training to students at the university. And then lastly, the third-party employment. So as I referred to, if you are going to work for a private institution, a private employer, for-profit employer, but you're going to be working at a higher education facility, then you need to provide the agreement between your private employer and that facility to show that you are allowed to work at that facility. So those are and then in addition to that, there must be well, I'll talk a little bit more about that in another slide, but essentially that's cap exemption. And so these are some of the clarifications that the government has made recently in the new rules as of January 17th as to cap exemption. And it's actually beneficial. It is less difficult, or at least by what they've stated, it should be less difficult to do cap exemption than it has been in the past, at least in terms of proof. So they did revise, or the government did revise the requirement for those who are not directly employed, so those people who are going to be working at cap-exempt facilities, universities, that kind of thing. You have to show that the majority of your time is working at that. So the majority would be just a little bit over the time that you are working. So if you're going to be working at a university on behalf of your private for-profit employer, you would need to show that out of maybe a 40-hour week, you will be working, the majority of that time there, which could be, 21, 22 hours of the time of that 40-hour week there. In addition to that, they altered the purpose and function of the cap exempt requirement. So you no longer need to prove that you have to, that the work that you're going to do at that university on behalf of your private employer, your for-profit employer, that you no longer have to show that your duties for that job is going to help further the mission of the hospital or the university that you're working at. Instead, you can show that some of your work is going to somehow be helpful, is going to advance or be helpful towards the purpose of the university that you're working. So if the university is asking you or if you're working at the university and you might be working in research there, but you're working at the lab there, if you can show certainly that the university has an interest in you working at that lab, and that is supporting their research mission or their education mission, then that would work. Another interesting fact is that you do not have to be physically working at the university, but if you're working on behalf of the university, not directly employed, but working on behalf or providing services that are beneficial to the university, but you're working remotely, either working at your private employer's facility, or even if you're working from home, that could also be considered as cap exempt.